Hey everyone, we're back at it today with another virtual lesson. My name is Mr. Jono, and today we'll be going over value scale and shading. So before we get into that with a bunch of vocabulary and definitions, I just want to take a minute and review what we've already done. So our first three lessons were on perspective, and we divided those up into 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective. And the easiest way that we can kind of review that is 1-point perspective was having an image or form converging to one vanishing point on the horizon line. Then 2-point perspective, we had 2 vanishing points. And if you remember 3-point perspective, we had 3 vanishing points, one on each side of the horizon line, and either one at the top or the bottom, depending on if you wanted a bird's eye view or a worm's eye view. So if you're still working through those lessons, feel free to review those videos before you get caught up with us on this particular lesson. As always, they're videos, so you can take your time, you can rewind, you can fast forward, you can do the studies more than once, you can show your friends, you can impress your parents. Take your time. We've got nothing but time these days, and we're looking for ways to keep busy and stay focused and be productive. And so one of those ways that we can do that is to continue to wash our hands and cover our faces. So before we get started with our lesson today, I want to take a moment and remind everyone that it's a good idea to wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. And also, you might want to cover your mouth if you go outside or you run an errand or you go to the grocery store. Anything that we can do to stay safe and protect ourselves from one another is going to go a long way in getting us over this way of life that we're in the middle of. So be safe out there, keep clean, and stay focused and help one another out. Okay? So once again, we're doing, what are we doing? Value scale and shading today. This is a lesson that is intended for 1st through 5th graders, but with all of my lessons, they are equally useful for people of all ages, including adults. So, once again, we'll get ready to get started by getting our hands all clean and washed and our brains focused on art making. And let's spend some time going over what exactly is a value scale and what can we do with these different forms of shading. Okay, so what exactly is value? Well, value is just the range of lights and darks in a particular drawing. The bigger your range is, the more variation of lights and darks you have, the more pleasing your image will be to the viewer. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a value scale that shows the lightest light and the darkest dark. And we're going to talk about different ways to physically draw that. So, we could shade it in, we can use little dots, we can do some cross hatching. We're going to go over all that stuff here in a little while. Right now, we're just kind of introducing the lesson and getting an idea of what value is and what it does for our drawings. So, I have a couple notes over here that I'm going to read, and hopefully we'll have a better understanding. So let me just start with this paragraph right here that I put together that will help us kind of comprehend value. The word value is used a lot around the art world, and for good reason. Value is one of the 7 elements of art. Value deals with the lightness or darkness of a color. So since we see objects and understand objects because of how dark or light they are, value is incredibly important to art. So, did you know that even not in art, even if you go outside, even as you're looking at this video right now, if there was no light, you wouldn't be able to see anything. So you cannot see what's in front of you unless you have some sort of light source. So what is a light source? Well, again, we'll touch on that in our vocabulary, but a light source obviously is just where the light is coming from. So I'm in my studio right now, and there's a window right over here. See? And you can see the light. That's my light source. So if I was drawing something right here on the wall behind me, our light source would be coming this way. So we would see the light there. So that's all a light source is. So, and as long as your darks and your lights are working in harmony with each other, and they're what's the word? They're working together, they're complementing each other, then one will have a beautifully drawn piece of work. So, in other words, even if you want to draw everything really, really dark or draw everything really, really light, you still want to have some value tones in the middle of that kind of bring the dark and the light together and all work in harmony, just like we do in school and with our friends and our family. So, another way that is taken care of is through the use of light and shadows. So even though we have, light and dark values, we also have shadows and highlights, which, again, shadows are dark, just like a dark value, and highlights are light, like the lightest value, but they're not necessarily the same. If you're walking down the street and the sun is shining on you and you look behind you and you see a shadow, that's not really a dark value, that's just a shadow. So they're very synonymous with each other, but they're not exactly the same thing. So once again, that's another example of why our vocabulary is so important. And after we're done with talking about value, that's exactly what we're going to do, is get into our vocabulary words, and just to be sure that we can all talk about value and understand what each other is saying and so forth. So once again, value, one of the 7 elements of art. If you'd like to know what the other 6 elements are, well, you're going to have to wait for another video, or you can go look it up yourself and teach me something. That would be beautiful. All right, so value, one of the 7 elements of art. It is a way to show the lightest light and the darkest dark. What else? We know that if there's no light, you can't see anything. Therefore, we need a light source. So our light source is going to shine down on us, and it is going to give us an idea of where to draw those lights and those darks and those shadows and those highlights. So before we get started, we'll go over some vocabulary words so we all know what we're talking about, and then we will do a little drawing that, or we'll do a value scale. We'll do a drawing of a value scale that will show us the value range of, the range of different values, I should say. All right, thank you very much, and let's get together on that vocabulary. All right, everyone, so by now you should know the drill. At this point of the video, we talk about our materials, and we go over our vocabulary words. So once again, the cool thing about all my videos are the material list is very short. All you need is a piece of paper, which I have on the wall. Even though I've already written on it, I've got another sheet of paper that we're going to use for the drawing. So maybe you need a couple sheets of paper. Who knows? Pencil. Pencil's always good to have. In this case, I'm going to predominantly use a Sharpie so everyone can see what I'm drawing on the video, but when I'm at home or I'm working in my sketchbook or I'm in my studio working on something, I usually always work in pencil. And if you're going to be working in pencil, you're probably going to need an eraser. And also, as usual, life is always a little bit easier with a ruler, but if you don't have one, don't worry about it. Life isn't perfect and neither does your drawing. So if you don't have a ruler, don't worry about it. Nothing that we're going to do today, tomorrow, or any other day is going to require a perfectly straight line. So with that in mind, let's go over our vocabulary words. So how many do I have here? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 vocabulary words. I'm going to read these out loud very slowly so everyone can comprehend them. And then I'm going to let us take a look of it written on the board. However, it might be a little too far away, so I'm going to move it closer when we're all done in an effort for everyone to be able to read very easily and, with no problem. So, let's get started. What is value? Well, like I said earlier, value is an element of art that's associated with lights and darks. So when we talk about something being dark or light or medium or gray or almost dark or almost white, we're talking about value. So that is what it is. Value is just the accumulation of lights and darks with whatever you're looking at. So the next vocabulary word is light source. Light source, like I said earlier, is just the origin of light. So today the light source is coming into my window from the left side, your right side, right over here, and that's pretty much all that is. It's just the origin of whatever the light's coming from. Value scale. Now, value scale is exactly what we're going to do today in order to practice our value range. So a value scale is just a guide to creating a range of value. And I won't spend too much time on that because we're literally going to do that exactly in the right after our vocabulary words. We're just going to draw a long box or a long rectangle and divide those up into squares and color each square in a particular value. That's all we're going to do, and that's all a value range is. Tints. So tints and shades kind of go together. Tints are very light values, almost white. Like my bandana has a light tint to it. And shades are dark values. So if my bandana has a light tint to it, my shirt has a dark shade. So pretty obvious there, right? Okay. Highlights. Highlights are areas where the light hits. So if you go look at yourself in the mirror and you turn on the lights, and if your mirror is like my mirror, the lights are like right above, they're right above your head and they shine down. So the forehead, my forehead and the top of my head is the lightest part when I look in the mirror. That is where the highlights are from the light source. And the shadows are areas where the dark hits or where there is no light. So if the light in my bathroom is shining above and it's putting highlights on my head and on my forehead, it's putting shadows on my chin and on my neck and right here on my cheeks. So, you know, that's all it's I'm trying to explain is the highlights and the shadows. The highlights are where the light areas hit, and the shadows are where there are no light areas, so the area is dark. Contrast. Now, contrast is the difference between the lights and the darks. So if you have something very dark next to something very light, it has very strong contrast. If you have something that's kind of like gray and medium right next to something that's a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, the contrast is very low. So the contrast is just the difference between something very light and something very dark. That's all. And the last thing we have are called pencil marks. And so that's not one specific definition. That is just, put this on here because we're going to be using different kinds of pencil marks today to draw our value scale. And some of the kinds that we're going to be using are hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and blending. So hatching is when you use like small lines to create value. Cross-hatching is when you use those lines and they cross each other to create value. Stippling is just dots. So some people call stippling pointillism. And blending is just what you think it is. You just color a little bit and then you blend it with maybe your finger, or maybe you have a blending tool. So, you know, whatever you have around the house to blend, you can blend. You can use a tissue, something like that. So those are our vocabulary words. And now that we're pretty familiar with the terminology that we need to use for this particular lesson, it's time to get started. Okay, before we start to draw, I forgot to tell you that I was going to hold these vocabulary words up close so you could see them and go over them. And that's what I'm doing right now. So take a couple minutes to look these over. Maybe if you want, you could just pause the video and you can take as long as you'd like. But I'm going to leave it up for 5 more seconds. All right. All right, so the first thing we're going to do before we start the value scale is to demonstrate the different types of pen or pencil marks that we might want to use for our value scale. The first one is, okay, y'all, the first thing that we're going to do before we get started on our value scale is just give some examples of the type of pen marks that we can use, or pencil marks that we can use when it's time to make our actual value scale. So go ahead and do what I've done and draw 4 boxes on your piece of paper. I drew them really big here so everyone would be able to see them easily, but on your piece of paper, they just have to be, maybe an inch by an inch big, just large enough to be able to demonstrate the different types of pencil marks. So the first one that we're going to start with is called hatching. And so I'm writing the word under each box as we continue. So hatching is just when you use a bunch of small linear marks to express your value. And one thing that we want to keep in mind while we're creating these examples and eventually our value scale is the closer you draw your pen marks to each other, the darker your value becomes, and the further away you draw them from each other, the lighter it becomes. So I know that's might be a little confusing. We'll be able to show what that means in our drawing here in a couple minutes, so just stick with me. So first one is hatching, and I'm going to spend a few minutes doing some hatching in this particular box, so we'll have an idea of what that means. Okay, so let's see if we can see that. I'm going to bring the computer a little closer. So you can see hatching is just taking some small pencil marks and drawing them really close to each other and gradually getting further away. Now I did that a little hastily, so it's not quite as pretty as it should be, but I think you get the idea. All right, now we've got cross hatching. Okay, cross-hatching is generally the same thing. The only difference is that your line marks cross each other, and it looks something like this. So you can see that is very similar to hatching. It just crosses each other. See that? Kind of looks like a completely different language that we can make up as we go along, huh? All right. The third one is stippling. Stippling is not the hardest, but it takes the longest to create. It's the most tiresome. It's the most tedious. All it is taking little dots and pointing dots everywhere all over the plane in an effort to create a value scale. It would look something like this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use a Sharpie because it'll be easier to see. All right. Now that was going to take a really long time to fill in that big box, so I stopped at the very beginning. But now you can see how up in the corner they're a lot closer together, and it gives the illusion of it being darker. Well, that's what we're trying to accomplish with stippling. All right. Now we got one more. One more, shading or blending. Blending takes the most finesse out of all of these, but it also can be the most rewarding. So in this box, we're just going to blend a dark value into a light value. So give me a couple seconds and I'll demonstrate that. And I'm going to use my finger to do some blending. All right, let's take a look at that one. Oh, I didn't even write it on the wall, or write the term under the box. All right. Whoop. Blending. Okay, so you can see I use my finger to blend, but and like I said, you could use a tissue, a blending tool, anything you can find. Also, you don't have to use anything to blend. You can just very precisely and very carefully color in your area with just a pencil, going from light to dark like I did at the beginning, and you don't have to use your finger or anything. You can just blend it with the pencil. So we have hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and blending. All right, so those are our main four pencil marks that we'll use to create a value scale. If you can come up with a different one, by all means, if you can be creative and think of something that no one else has, or think of something that no one else would want to use, then that's even that's even better. That's a brilliant move. So think about that while you're going over these techniques. Think about how you can improve on those techniques or make them different. Think about how much you like them, or think about how much you don't like them and you want to find something else to do. So the next step is, so now we're going to, on our bottom half of the paper, we're going to create our actual value scale, and we can use that value scale as a guide, kind of like a cheat sheet to take with us when it's time to work on our drawing, our real drawing, the one that we're going to show off to the world. And we can use our value scale to kind of show us different value ranges and different shades and different tints of value that we can apply into our drawing. So the next thing I want us to do is to draw a long rectangle about, I don't know, 1 to 2, we'll just say 1 inch high. So I'm going to draw it a little bit bigger so we can see it on the screen. So we'll do something like this. I don't know. All right, that's pretty big, and that's going to be a big area for me to color in. So we might want to, I'm going to draw this one big, but the one I'm actually going to work on, I might draw a little bit smaller, so I'll be able to portray exactly what I'm trying to get through to everyone. So now that we have our long rectangle, we want to divide that rectangle into, let's see, 9 sub boxes. So I'm going to do something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, I kind of ran out of room. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to draw another box. 7, 8, 9. Okay? So the reason we want to have 9 boxes is because we're going to have one box be completely dark, one box be completely light, and then a box in the middle is going to be about half of that. And then we'll be able to kind of make this side dark and this side light. So what I like to do is number these from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that's how many we have. This one is going to be completely black. And this one's going to be completely white. And this one is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 50%. So, now that we have those labeled, we can go ahead and kind of start putting that together. So I'm going to redraw my box a little bit smaller so it's easier for me to shade in my value scale. When I'm completely done, I'll move the computer up close so you can see everything very easily. All right. You start working on yours and I'll start working on mine. Let's see, I'm going to switch over to a pencil as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, like I said, is draw my first box completely dark. Now, what you might want to do is pick one of the drawing techniques to use in your box. Since I have a really soft pencil, I'm going to use the blending technique. If you want to try the hatching, or one of my favorites is the cross hatching. So somebody out there try the cross hatching and see what that'll look like. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw my first box as dark as possible. Like when you're coloring this in, I want you to pretend like you're out in the middle of a field and it's midnight and there are no lights and there's no cars and there's no moon and there's no stars. It's just pitch black. That's how dark this box needs to be. So you work on yours and I'll work on mine. Okay, so we've got one completely dark box. Now this box, number 9, is going to be completely white. So good news, that one's already finished. We're not going to draw anything in it. It's going to be as light as the lightest thing that you can even think of. So if we have a dark one and a light one, that means in the middle we need, we need to color in this box half as dark as this and half as light as that. So what is think of how dark this is, and then draw box number 5, half as dark. And we'll always be able to go back and correct these. We can always add more. So if you're unsure, if you think that you might be drawing too dark or too light, err on the side of caution and draw it too light, because we can always make it darker when we're touching things up. Okay, so at number 5, here I go. I'm going to draw it what I think is half as dark as box number 1. All right. So that's a pretty good guess right now, and like I said, we'll be able to edit that a little bit in the future once we get a little bit more boxes, a few more boxes drawn in. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the dark section, and in the number 3 box, we're going to draw the number 3 box a little bit darker than number 5 and a little bit lighter than number 1. So somewhere in the middle of that. All right, so I don't know if that's easy to see, but we'll take a look when the whole value scale is done. But I think I've got this one, box number 3, lighter than box number 1, but darker than box number 5. And just for safety measures, I'm going to color in box number 1 a little bit darker, because I think that box number 2 is going to need box number 1 to be a little bit darker. So now that even looks more dark than it was, and now we're going to take box 2 and color that one lighter than box number 1, but darker than box number 3. All right, I think that's pretty good. So now you're starting to see our value scale a little bit. We've got box number 1, 100% dark, box number 2, 90% dark, box number 3, 80% dark, box number 5 is somewhere around 50 or 60% dark, so and on and on and on. So now we're going to go right back to box number 4 and make that one darker than number 3, but lighter than number 5. So take a couple minutes and work on your box number 4 while I work on mine. Okay, so now we have box number 1 through 5 done. And you know, now that I look at it, mine might not be perfect, but it's certainly sufficient and it's certainly helping me. And I think you can definitely tell the difference between the darkness or the value of each box. So now that we've got box numbers 1 through 5 done, be sure that you make note that that is the dark side, and now we're going to work on the light side. So have a little bit lighter hand than you did the first time, because these next boxes are going to be a lot lighter than the first group of boxes. So now we know number 5 is 50% dark and number 9 is 0% dark. So somewhere in the middle, we'll say number 7, we need to make number 7 lighter than number 5, but darker than number 9. All right. Now we can come back to number 6 and make number 6 lighter than 5, but darker than 7. All right, and then number 8 is going to be very, very light. All right, okay. So now that we have a general idea of what our value range looks like, let's kind of take a look at it and see if we need to manipulate any boxes. So number 1 is pretty dark. It's the darkest. And number 9 is the lightest. Now, because my overall value range was pretty heavy, and the difference between number 8 and number 9 was so drastic, I did some very, very light shading in box number 9, but it's still the lightest area out of all the boxes, and I just think it's a little bit more appropriate to have a little bit of drawing in there. So if you think that your box number 9 that is completely white looks like it doesn't belong or it's missing a little bit, you could give it a very, very light touch of blending, and it'll kind of help bring that along. So what I'm going to do now is bring my computer closer so you can see. There you go. So take a look at that. So you can see how number 1 is the darkest, number 9 is the lightest, and it gradually gets lighter as you proceed. All right. So that is all a value scale is. So now that we understand the different range of value, we can take that information and apply it to our own drawings. So once again, I thank you for hanging out with me during this lesson, and I hope that you were able to take something out of it and maybe enhance your own drawings and your own art practice, and as well as help others. So if you have any questions or comments, please send us an email, and I would be happy to answer any of those questions that you would like or that you would have. All right, thank you all. Have a great day. All right, everyone, now that we've gone through our value scale and we have read over our vocabulary, I'd like to take a minute and just kind of conclude what we learned and kind of be sure that we're all on the same page. So my first question for everyone is, were you able to explore the various shading techniques? Did you understand the terms whether we use cross-hatching and stippling and hatching and blending? Were you able to demonstrate those on your own piece of paper? Do you understand what those techniques are and how to use them? Next question is, are you able to apply the vocabulary that you learned today with the art lesson that we just went through? You know, it's always very important to be able to associate the vocabulary words with what you're doing. That will only make you a stronger artist and a stronger person. So hopefully you understood all those words, and if you didn't, please take time to rewind and go over the vocabulary words. There's not a lot of them. They're pretty simple. It shouldn't be too hard for you, okay? Next question is, did you have any problems with the demo? Do you have any questions about the demo? Think about what we were doing. We kind of did a couple things at once. You know, did you understand all the drawing techniques? Did you understand how to build a value scale? Does it have to be just 9 boxes? No, it could be more, it could be less. I just thought that 9 boxes was a good amount to be able to show you the information that I'm trying to get across. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to send us an email that's associated with this link, and we can get those questions over to me, and I'll be able to answer them and help you out and help you understand any problems that you have. Also, if you don't have any questions and you just have comments, or you learned something that maybe you don't think someone else learned, or you thought of a really cool idea that other people should know about, send us an email for that too. It doesn't just have to be because you don't understand anything. It can be about because you completely understand it and you want to spread what you learned to someone else. So, it's always important to share your information, and it's always important to work with others so we can, work collaboratively in this world and make the world a better place. So, lastly, did you understand the shading and the value range and how it applies to art? Most importantly, if you've been picking up on these lessons, is each following lesson is still relative to the previous lesson that we learned. So when we learned 1-point perspective, we were planting a seed for 2-point perspective, and then we planted a seed for 3-point perspective, and then now we're working on shading, and now we're going to put those two things together in our next lesson and see how those aesthetics can brighten our image and our idea, and we can get our creative ideas across to each other. So again, if you are struggling with this lesson, or you have any questions about the vocabulary or the demo that we did, please send along a question, or please send along an email, and we will answer your questions as quickly as possible. I thank you for hanging out with us today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a great weekend.